I'm an economist, and one of the occupational hazards of being an economist is that I have to listen to people speaking about economics who don't know what they're talking about. On the train, I'll hear people telling each other how we need to freeze energy prices. In the supermarket, I'll overhear people talking about how we can fix the housing market. On Facebook, or callers into talk radio will tell us what's wrong with the world and how we can fix it by making sure that the rich pay their fair share of taxes. I'm surrounded by people who have strong opinions about my subject, but haven't really thought carefully about those opinions and haven't really reflected systematically or studied the subject. Now, I'm sure that this is special to economists. It's not the sort of problem that you have if you're, for instance, let's say, a nuclear physicist or an expert in ancient Sanskrit. A marine biologist doesn't have to sit next to somebody at the pub who lectures him on his own subject. You can imagine going to the pub, the marine biologist pulls up a bar stool and Barry next to him starts to say, "Dear, how about this geezer who reckons that an appropriate measure is thymine decorporation for the heterotrophic bacterioplankton production in marine surface waters." What a muppet! I don't know why I'm still holding this. But the marine biologist is safe, the economist isn't. And Barry might not express his views about marine biology, but he's going to share the benefits of expertise about economics. So what does Barry think about capitalism? Barry thinks a few things about it. First of all, Barry says that capitalism is driven by selfishness. He says it's a system of inequality where the poor get poorer and the rich get richer at the expense of the poor. And he says it's a system which is built and run by the rich and powerful for their own benefit. Now, you might have some sympathy with this view. You might even agree with Barry. But if you do, let me tell you that you're wrong about capitalism. The first thing is that Barry doesn't know what capitalism is, and he doesn't know how it works. If he thinks that it's a system of exploitation run by the rich and powerful only for their own benefit at the expense of the poor, then he doesn't know what it is. So what is capitalism? And how does it work? Capitalism is a system of private property rights. A system of private property rights which can be exchanged as long as there's consent on both sides of the transaction. A system of private property rights where you can exchange those property rights, but only if both parties to the transaction give their consent. Now, why is this an important thing, and why is it a good thing? Well, first of all, consent is a really good safeguard. If you can't be forced into a transaction, if consent is required, then it's a protection against violent coercion being a way to get what you want. You have to get somebody's consent before you can induce them to enter into a trade with you. And that's a good safeguard of protection. The second thing is that capitalism, because it's about consent and because individuals can hold private property, it's also a safeguard against enslavement. If I own my own body and I can do with it what I want, if I own my own labor and I can do what I want with it, if I really own my own property and I'm allowed to hold that property, I can thumb my nose at the state and the powerful and say, this is mine and you can't touch it, as long as those rights are protected and guaranteed. But as well as the advantages that are implicit in capitalism, as well as the intrinsic qualities of capitalism being about consent and rights, it also has some really very good side effects. What are those side effects? Well, first of all, it solves the incentive problem. What do I mean by that? Capitalism solves the problem of what motivates you to do what you do. And it motivates a number of different things. One of the things that is motivated under capitalism is effort. So if you think that the rewards you get are quite separate from and independent of the effort that you invest, you might not have a very big reason to work extra hard. And in a socialist or communist society, often people's motivation is blunted. In a capitalist society, where you're able to enjoy the rewards of your own efforts, it gives you a reason to work harder, it gives you a reason to be more productive. I think everybody knows this argument, but there's another one that people don't talk about as much as they should, and that's this. It solves the incentive problem of risk. It turns out that for a prosperous economy, we don't just need to be working hard, we need to be taking a few gambles. We need to be trying things that probably won't work, but maybe they will. And capitalism incentivizes risk and gives people a reason to experiment with things and to risk their savings and try out ideas. This is something that is not a hallmark of communism. If you're working in a communist bureau and you have the possibility of making some improvement or trying something that might not work, the benefits don't come to you if it succeeds, but you bear the cost of your own failure in terms of your reputation or maybe in terms of consequences imposed on you by the state. Under capitalism, there's the hope that you can benefit from the rewards if your risks pay off. And then it solves the problem of risk in terms of, it solves the problem of incentive in terms of motivating you into the discovery process. What does that mean? It means then that capitalism gives you a reason to try to learn more about what to do next. It gives you a reason to try to find out ways of reducing the costs of what you're doing or increasing the benefits of what you're doing. So capitalist entrepreneurs, and indeed anybody within capitalism, has a strong reason to try to think of what would make the customer extra happy. What could I do that would make people want to do business with me? What can I do to pull away from the competition in order to do something that's going to delight the people I'm trying to sell to? Or what can I do within my organization that can make things more efficient, that can stop wasting so many resources? And if you look at government departments, often wastage is monumental. Within capitalism, of course there's sometimes wastage, but there's a reason that disciplines us to be more careful about how we use the resources in the capitalist system, in our businesses. And then the other thing that capitalism does, as well as having all those intrinsic benefits I talked about, as well as giving us a solution to the incentive problem, capitalism also solves the knowledge problem. And it does so through the price system. Now this morning I went to Sainsbury's and I looked at the fruit aisle. And it might surprise you to learn, I've never really noticed this before, it might surprise you to learn that the bananas in Sainsbury's cost 20 pence and the pears cost 50 pence. Now I thought I should ask Monica at Sainsbury's why this is so. And Monica was a little bit nervous about the reason for my question. But she said something very interesting. What do you think she said when I asked her, why are the bananas 20 pence when the pears are 50 pence? And she said this, she said, I don't know. And that's an important answer because the fact is that with the price mechanism within capitalism, you don't need to know everything about how to produce pears and how to produce bananas. Actually, Monica made a guess. She said, maybe the pears are coming from further than the bananas. And then we looked at the sticker and it said that the pears were coming from the Netherlands and bananas were coming from Colombia. So it probably wasn't because the cost of freight was higher for the journey from the Netherlands. But the point is that we can discover something about the preferences of strangers we've never met through the price mechanism. We can discover what it costs to rent land in Colombia, what it costs to hire labour in the Netherlands, what it costs to pay for packers at the dockside. And we discover something about the preferences of strangers. If suddenly the cost of pears goes up, it might be because suddenly people like them more. You don't need to know the preferences of every individual and how much they like pears versus bananas. What happens is that all of that information is brought into focus through the prices. And that's what capitalism does particularly well. So capitalism has a lot to offer, and a lot about capitalism is a very good thing. What are Barry's other objections in the public? By the way, I should say, you heard me imitate Barry's voice. For those of you who haven't visited an English pub before, you might be interested to learn that that's the way we all talk down at Loser when we're visiting the pub. And I think it's something about the warm beer that does it. But I wasn't meaning to insult Barry by giving you a parody in this guy. Actually, Barry, he's not an economist, but he might be a first-rate plumber. He might indeed be a leading heart surgeon. In fact, Barry is an aeronautical engineer. Now, I'm the sort of guy who thinks if you can't fix something with sticky tape, it's because you're not using enough sticky tape. So you wouldn't really want me to be doing Barry's job at Boeing. You wouldn't want me fixing the planes that you're flying in or trying to think of ways of making them more efficient. You wouldn't want me, you're not going to fly in a plane that's been designed and built according to principles laid down by a guy who's never studied engineering. But, because of democracy, Barry gets to decide which political manifesto Barry and other people like him, other non-economists, get to choose which political manifesto we're going to adopt and which economic policy we're going to implement. Because he can vote, he takes his ignorance to the polling booth and imposes it on the rest of us. And we have to live under a system which is designed by politicians who are pandering to voters who don't know anything about economics and don't understand how capitalism works. Okay, so what are Barry's other concerns? He said that capitalism is about selfishness. He says it's about inequality, that the poor get poorer while the rich get richer at the poor's expense. Well, I want to address those couple of things. First of all, by saying that inequality matters much less than you think. It matters less than you think because if you're a poor person struggling to make ends meet, if you can't afford to buy the shoes that really your daughter should have been wearing 3 months ago, if you can't afford perhaps even to buy enough food so that you don't have to go to bed hungry every night, then your problem isn't how much caviar Bill Gates eats. Your problem isn't that Bill Gates is flying on a private plane. Your problem is lack of money. Your problem is to do with poverty and wealth, not to do with the difference between your wealth and some other guy's wealth. So inequality doesn't matter as much as you think. The other thing to say about Barry's critique is that under capitalism it's not true that the poor get poorer and the rich get richer. Under capitalism the rich get richer and the poor get richer as well. It may well be that in some cases there's a divergence of the rich and poor as they get richer at varying rates. But of course if you're a poor person, again you're not chiefly concerned with how fast the rich person is getting richer. You're concerned about how you are faring and how much your prospects are improving over time. And then the other thing is to say that the rich get rich at the expense of the poor. That can happen in kleptocracies. That can happen where politicians are granting special favors to their buddies in business. That is not capitalism. Under capitalism, the way you get richer, as we focused on a moment ago, is by finding ways of doing things for other people that make their lives better. So Bill Gates didn't steal this money from the poor. Microsoft didn't generate profits at the expense of the poor. Microsoft was selling software. They had an idea and they invited us to share in that idea with them. And we chose to, if we did at all, because we thought that the benefit of buying the software outweighed the ticket price of that software. Which means that Bill Gates is getting rich only to the extent that he can persuade us that we should buy something because it's going to be good for us. Now, am I saying that there's no role for government? Am I saying that there's no way of improving capitalism? Perhaps there is some way. Maybe we could tweak it. Maybe at the edges we could introduce some regulations. There's various different things that we could at least consider trying that might make capitalism work better. We might be able to deal with some of the inequality problems. We might be able to take capitalism and preserve its virtues, but at the same time start to make some things about it even better. That's at least an aspiration we could entertain. But what I want to say is, we shouldn't tamper with capitalism before we've understood it. And we shouldn't kill it while we're trying to perfect it. Now, I told you I'm not an aeronautical engineer, but I do know this about planes. Most accidents happen because of something connected with takeoff or with landings. Now, here's an idea from this amateur aeronautical engineer. What if we didn't have planes taking off and landing? What if we kept them in the air all the time and we refueled the planes in the sky so there was no takeoff and landings to worry about? Could be awkward for the passengers. They'd have to live on the plane forever, which means that perhaps we're dealing with a safety problem with a solution that probably doesn't help air travel get better. The other thing we could do, of course, is we could make a law saying that no plane is allowed to take off at all in the first place. But what have we done there if we improve air safety by banning planes from taking off? Well, what we've got then is not a plane at all. What we've done is we've taken air travel, which is a magnificent gift, and we've, instead of having planes flying people to places they want to go in a hurry, we've just got a jet-propelled bus. And all of the advantages of air travel have been cancelled out by our attempt to improve it. So I think that's a little metaphor for what we can do with capitalism. We don't want to do things to capitalism that are going to negate or cancel its virtues. What we want to do is, before we tamper with it, we want to understand what capitalism is, and we want to understand how it works, and we want to recognize that it's probably the most valuable discovery in all of human history. Thank you.